And what have been some of the implications of this emphasis on metrics? Dare I say costs?
On cost upon who, like
the cost
society,
of this focus. Are we not funding? Are we in fact funding more service? I agree with you completely that certainly service delivery is the best example, but
an important one.
The guy who created this program, are those guys not getting funded? Are arts organizations in some way not being funded? Are sort of those collectives of people who do, bringing it back to this question of social movements, bubble together to create a social movement not being supported? Is, you hear many foundations say, we don't support advocacy.
I think that it just requires people to be especially thoughtful, right? So I was having a conversation recently with Ed Polly, who's the director of evaluation for the Wallace Foundation. And so, kind of asking him to walk through, we wanted to do a case study focusing on Wallace as a best practice organization for evaluation, knowledge management, and communications, right? And so he emphasized, and I thought this was a really thoughtful point, and not one that you might arrive at right off the bat if you were just introducing evaluation approaches to your organization. They come up with a set of metrics by which they're going to measure all the grants in a particular program, right? A cluster of grants at a portfolio level, not just an individual grantee level. So they come up with these metrics. They do it by conversations with grantees, conversations with thought leaders, bottom up, top down, blah, blah, blah. They come up with the metrics, right? So then they apply these metrics for a while, and they watch it, and they talk to the grantees, and they think about it. And then from time to time, they find that some of these metrics are distorting the actual work, right? Because people start chasing the metric, or the metric is sending a message about this is important and that's not important, you should do more of this and less of that, right? And somehow in their process, they have endeavored to be able to have enough open and honest discussion from the grantee, from the program officer, whatever, that when they identify that the metric is distorting the purpose of the program and the project, they change the metric, right? So think of all the people who set metrics that might distort, who never notice it, or if they notice it, don't do anything about it because they think somehow that's cheating or gaming, or right? And then that to me is perhaps an unintended cost or a negative implication of metrics. But if you just if you're really thoughtful about how you're applying it, any tool is good if you use it well, and it's not good if you don't use it well, right? So these are just tools. They're not in and of themselves necessarily positive or negative. It's how they're applied.
I think what's interesting about evaluations and matrix and knowledge management is that oftentimes they're very value loaded, right? In the sense that there's a good or bad, and I always wish there was a way to kind of erase that narrative, because I do think it's the wrong way to kind of think about things. Like, I think we all want to do better, and we all want to know that we're making an impact. I think that's just logical, right? Everybody wants to know that they're raising the best child or working at their best capacity, usually. I think that's just common. I don't think that belongs to any particular camp. But I feel like what the cost has been is that there isn't enough conversation about, so what does social justice evaluation look like? Again, we keep using these kind of cookie cutter universal models to kind of hold the complexity of the nonprofit community. And I think that's a bit of a farce and unfair, right? So you could lay out an argument that, okay, since, HIV/AIDS is rising in certain communities, younger communities of color, these groups who are working on HIV/AIDS are ineffective. So therefore, do you decide to kind of pull the plug on that funding? If you're using your right or wrong evaluative measure, according to your statistics, these groups are ineffective. And is that the ethical response to such a condition? I think it's such a much more vibrant, nuanced conversation. I wish I could kind of pull, the social justice advocates and social entrepreneur advocates together to really think about what more of an intersectional analysis would look like. And I do feel like what has produced over the last few years is that we definitely have given birth to a new marketplace of evaluations and evaluators.